Welcome, welcome, welcome. We're going to read about the Hanukkah story. Okay. I heard about pig something on the altar and hammer Maccabees and all this other stuff. But now it's time to actually let's go and see where all this comes from. So we are going to I'll put the link down in the notes so you can read for yourself. But if not, if you're able to, let's go to BibleGateway.com and you're going to go to the Revised Standard Version and we're going to read First Maccabees chapter 1. We're going to read chapter 1 through 5 to get the basic understanding. There's way more. I think there's I don't know how many books of the Maccabees there are, but there's more than what we're reading. We're just going to do these 5 chapters to get the gist of what this Hanukkah holiday is all about. And this is where Rav Bernstein instructed us to go when we first read about the story. Funny enough, the Maccabees is part of the Apocrypha, the books that didn't make it into the canon of the Bible, that's housed in the Christian Bible. And so you would not find these books any other this Jewish history except in the Bible, the Christian Bible. And it's called the Christian Bible in a sense because it has the Torah, it has the prophets, and it has the writings, but then it also has the books that's written by the Jews, that the Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and also the letters written by John, Peter, and still Jews, and Rav Shaul, Apostle Paul, you may call him, still Jews. So housed there in the middle is more stuff about Jews, which is called the Apocrypha and the Maccabees. So I'd like to dedicate this to Rav Stephen Bernstein, my mother Iris Elizabeth Roque, and my grandfather Eddie and Lydia Hollinger. Who would you like to dedicate this time to? May their memories be for a blessing. Let's go. So again, BibleGateway.com, First Maccabees, chapters 1 through 5. I think I need coffee. Okay, I'm literally just going to read this. Let's go. Okay, so, okay, let me just see if I can get this a little bit bigger. I think that'll do. Okay, so the subtitle starts off Alexander the Great. So after Alexander, son of Philip the Macedonian, who came from the land of Kittim, had defeated Darius, king of the Persians and the Medes, he succeeded him as king. He had previously become king of Greece. He fought many battles, conquered strongholds, and put to death the kings of the earth. He advanced to the ends of the earth, and he plundered many nations. When the earth became quiet before him, he was exalted and his heart was lifted up. He gathered a very strong army and ruled over countries, nations, and princes, and they became tributary to him. This is Alexander the Great now. This is talking about, okay? After this, he fell sick and perceived that he was dying, so he summoned his most honored officers who had been brought up with him from youth, and he divided his kingdom among them while he was still alive. And after Alexander had reigned 12 years, he died. Wow. Then his officers began to rule, each in his own place. They all put on crowns after his death, and so did their sons after them for many years, and they caused many evils on the earth. Okay, now the subtitle says Antiochus Epiphanes and Renegade Jews. So from them being the officers that began to rule, and they put crowns on their heads, and they put crowns after his death, and so did their sons after them for many years, and they caused many evils on the earth. So from them came forth a sinful root called Antiochus Epiphanes, son of Antiochus the king. He had been a hostage in Rome. Wow. He began to reign in the 137th year of the kingdom of the Greeks. There's a note at the bottom. What does that mean? Dang, take a long time to get to the bottom. 170 BCE. Okay. So, I'm sorry, let me get back. Jeez Louise, that was a long trip. Okay, so in those days, lawless men came forth from Israel. Lawless men came forth from Israel. Lawless, and when you are coming from the Jewish perspective, because the Maccabees is written by Jews, that means these are people with no Torah. They are not following the Torah. Lawless men. Okay. So in those days, lawless men came forth from Israel, and men without the Torah, Jews without the Torah, and they misled many, saying, "Let us go and make a covenant with the Gentiles round about us, for since we separated from them, many evils have come upon us." This proposal pleased them. And some of the people eagerly went to the king. He authorized them to observe the ordinances of the Gentiles. Whoa. So they built a gymnasium in Jerusalem according to the Gentile custom, and removed the marks of circumcision and abandoned the Holy Covenant. They joined with the Gentiles and sold themselves to do evil. Okay, I gotta tell you this, because Rab Bernstein used to teach us about this history right here. Okay, the part where it says they removed the marks of circumcision and they abandoned the Holy Covenant, meaning the Torah. They joined with the Gentiles and sold themselves to do evil. Evil means anything against what the Torah says to do. So if the Torah says, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy, they won't remember the Sabbath day to keep holy. If it says, do not steal people or do not murder people, they'll steal people and murder people. Okay, so whatever the Torah says to do, they'll do the opposite. That's the definition of evil. And Rab Bernstein taught us that these people, they wanted to be in the gymnasium, and you know, it is circumcised, right? So you could see right away, oh, this guy is circumcised as a Jew. And so they wanted to blend in with the Gentile. He said they would take skin off their leg, and they would sew it onto the tip of their you-know-what. They sew it to the tip of the penis so that it can appear that they did not have a circumcision. I don't know how you do that, or take the skin from somewhere and sew it on there just so they could participate in the Greek games in the gymnasium. That's how far these people abandoned Torah. I mean, this is crazy, right? These are crazy times. Okay, so let's keep it moving. So when Antiochus saw that his kingdom was established, he determined to become king of the land of Egypt. Okay, so we just learned about Alexander the Great. Alexander has from him the 4 generals. Okay, and from one of those generals, one of those guys, they had a son, Antiochus Epiphanes, and this guy, he's called the sinful root in verse 10, and he is Antiochus Epiphanes, son of Antiochus the king. He had been a hostage in Rome. How that happened, I don't know. And he began to reign in the year 175 BCE. The lawless people come out of Israel and start approving assimilation of the Jewish people. Throw that Torah away. We don't need that. Let's start doing the things like the Greeks do, because since we abandoned the Greeks' ways, we've had all this evil happen to us. So let's assimilate and stop doing the Torah and all this stuff. And so now the scripture goes back to Antiochus, who was held in hostage. I don't know how he got free. They don't say that part. So when Antiochus saw that his kingdom was established, he determined to become king of the land of Egypt, that he might reign over both kingdoms. Excuse me. He invaded Egypt with a strong force, with chariots and elephants and cavalry, and with a large fleet. Wow. He engaged Ptolemy, king of Egypt, in battle, and Ptolemy turned and fled before him. And many were wounded and fell, and they captured the fortified cities of the land of Egypt, and he plundered the land of Egypt. Okay. So he comes in, takes over Egypt. Now, this subtitle says persecution of the Jews. So after subduing Egypt, Antiochus returned in the 140th year. Okay, let's say that's 190 or something CE, because let's say 169, 175. Oh, that's right, it goes backwards. 169. I thought it was 20 some odd years difference. It doesn't matter. 169 BCE. He went up against Israel. Antiochus went up against Israel and came to Jerusalem with a strong force. He arrogantly entered the sanctuary and took the golden altar, the lampstand for the light, the menorah, and all its utensils. He took also the table for the showbread, the bread of the presence, the cups that's used for drinking, for the drink offerings, the bowls, the golden censers, the curtains, the crowns. Man, he took everything. And the gold decoration on the front of the temple. He stripped it off on the front of the temple. Lord of mercy. He took the silver and the gold and the costly vessels. He took also the hidden treasures, which he, hold up, it was hidden. The Joker found the hidden stuff. You know, little fake wall and the little thing in the floor, the board in the floor. He found all that. Taking them all, he departed to his own land. He committed deeds of murder and spoke with great arrogance. Israel mourned deeply, and in every community, rulers and elders groaned. Maidens and young men became faint. The beauty of the women faded. Folk got ugly. Every bridegroom took up a lament. Oh, she who sat in the bridal chamber was mourning. Everybody's done. Even the land shook for its inhabitants, and all the house of Jacob was clothed with shame. This subtitle, The Occupation of Jerusalem. So 2 years later, the king sent to the cities of Judah a chief collector of tribute. And the king, Antiochus, came to Jerusalem with a large force. Deceitfully, he spoke peaceable words to them, and they believed him. And he suddenly fell upon the city, dealt it a severe blow, and destroyed many people of Israel. He plundered the city, burned it with fire, tore down its houses and the surrounding walls. They took captive the women and the children, seized the cattle. Then they fortified the city of David with a great strong wall and strong towers, and it became their citadel, the foreigners. And they stationed there a sinful people, lawless men. Again, they didn't even have their men doing the dirty work. They had the non-Torah following people, these lawless men, there guarding the foreigners' tower in Jerusalem. These lawless men strengthened their position. They stored up arms and food and collected the spoils. These Jews, these non-Torah following Jews, they stored up arms, weaponry, and food, and collecting the spoils of Jerusalem, they stored them there, and it became a great snare. It became an ambush against the sanctuary, an evil adversary of Israel continually, because that thing is like right by the temple. That fortification, it became an ambush against the sanctuary. Woo. On every side of the sanctuary, they shed innocent blood. They even defiled the sanctuary. Because of them, the residents of Jerusalem fled. Jerusalem became a dwelling of strangers. She became strange to her offspring, and her children forsook her. Her sanctuary became desolate as a desert. Her feasts were turned into mourning, her Sabbaths into a reproach, and her honor into contempt. Her dishonor now grew as great as her glory. Her exaltation was turned into mourning. This is a subtitle, Installation of Gentile Cults. Then the king wrote to his whole kingdom that all should be one people, and that each should give up his customs. All the Gentiles accepted the command of the king. Many, even from Israel, gladly adopted his religion. They sacrificed to idols and profaned the Sabbath. Wow. And the king sent letters by messengers to Jerusalem and the cities of Judah. He directed them to follow customs strange to the land, to forbid burnt. The king? What? And the king sent letters by messengers to Jerusalem, to the cities of Judah, and the king directed them to follow these strange customs in their land, to forbid burnt offerings, olah offerings, and sacrifices and drink offerings in the sanctuary, to profane the Shabbats and the feasts. So profaning, you're not doing it. You're not honoring the Sabbath. You're not having your Pesach, your Passover, your Feast of Tabernacles, your Feast of Weeks. You're not having none of this. Yom Kippur. Can you imagine? This is crazy. So, defile your sanctuary and your priests. Wow. Well, how do you defile a priest? You have them marry women they're not supposed to marry. You have them eat foods they're not supposed to eat. Do things they're not supposed to do. Because in the Torah, it tells you exactly how to use the sanctuary and how the priests are supposed to be used. And he told them to build altars and sacred precincts and shrines for idols, and to sacrifice swine, pigs, and other unclean animals, and leave their sons uncircumcised. Don't cut that off. Keep that on there. They were to make themselves abominable by everything unclean, tameh, and profane. Wow. So that they should forget the law, the Torah, and change all ordinances, the mishpatim, and the hukim, the things that they have to do. Whoever does not obey the command of the king shall die. And in such words he wrote, this is a letter he wrote to the whole kingdom, and he appointed inspectors over the people and commanded the cities of Judah to offer sacrifice, city by city, to their gods, the foreign gods. Many of the people, everyone who forsook the Torah, joined them, and they did evil in the land. Remember, evil is anything that is against what the Torah says to do. And they drove Israel into hiding in every place of refuge they had. Israel meaning the people that are following, the Jews that are following the Torah. Now on the 15th day of Kislev, in the 140th year, let's see, what's that? Year 167 BCE, they erected a desolating sacrilege upon the altar of burnt offering, the Olah offering. So they being, I don't know who the they is. I don't know if it's Jews and foreigners alike, but they put something on the altar that ought not be there. They also built altars in the surrounding cities of Judah and burned incense at the doors of the houses and in the streets. The book of the Torah, which they found, they tore to pieces and burnt it with fire. Where the book of the covenant was found in the possession of anyone, or if anyone adhered to the law, the decree of the king condemned them to death. If they were found with a Torah scroll in their possession, they were condemned to death. They kept using violence against Israel. Again, Israel is the one that is still keeping with the Torah. Jews that are keeping with the Torah, and Gentiles that have become proselytes into Judaism. They kept using violence against these people, against those found month after month in these cities. And on the 25th day of the month, they offered sacrifice on the altar, which was upon the altar of burnt offering, according to the decree. They put to death the women who had their children circumcised. The mothers got killed, and their families, and those who circumcised them. They hung the infants from their mothers' necks. But many in Israel stood firm and were resolved in their hearts not to eat unclean food. They chose to die rather than to be defiled by food or to profane the holy covenant, the Torah. They were not profaning the Torah, and they did die. And very great wrath came upon Israel. This is Maccabees. This sound like something like we just, unfortunately, the Jewish people had experienced here recently. But look, this is the Maccabees. This is where Hanukkah is coming from. This is what they're celebrating. I mean, Jews. Just wow. Okay, let's go to the next chapter. So that was just chapter 1. Good Lord of mercy. Okay, let me just, how do I get to chapter 2? Let's see, there we go. Okay. Now this is subtitled Mattathias and his sons. So in those days, Mattathias, the son of John, son of Simeon, a priest. He's a priest of the sons of Joarib. They moved from Jerusalem and they settled in Modain. He had 5 sons, this Mattathias. He had 5 sons: John, surnamed Gadi, Simon, called Thasi, Judas, called Maccabees, Eleazar, called Aran, and Jonathan, called Aphas. He saw the blasphemies, he being Mattathias, the dad, he saw the blasphemies being committed in Judah and Jerusalem. And remember, these guys are all priests, Kohanim. He saw the blasphemies being committed in Judah and Jerusalem, And he said, alas, why was I born to see this? The ruin of my people, the ruin of the holy city, and to dwell there when it was given over to the enemy, the sanctuary given over to aliens, foreigners. Her temple has become like a man without honor. Her glorious vessels have been carried into captivity. Her babes have been killed in her streets, her youths by the sword of the foe. What nation has not inherited her palaces and has not seized her spoils? All her adornment has been taken away. No longer free she has become a slave. And behold, our holy place, our beauty and our glory have been laid to waste. The Gentiles have profaned it. Why should we live any longer? And Mattathias and his sons rent their clothes, put on sackcloth, and mourned greatly. And now this is subtitled Pagan Worship Refused. Then the king's officers who were enforcing the apostasy came to the city of Modin to make them, whoever's there, those people, to offer sacrifice. They were forced to do this. Many from Israel came to them, and Mattathias and his sons were assembled. Then the king's officer spoke to Mattathias as follows: You are a leader, honored and great in this city, Mattathias, and supported by sons and brothers. Now be the first to come and do what the king commands, as all the Gentiles and the men of Judah and those that are left in Jerusalem have done. Then you and your sons will be numbered among the friends of the king, and you and your sons will be honored with silver and gold and many gifts. But Mattathias answered and said in a loud voice, Even if all the nations that live under the rule of the king obey him and have chosen to do this, and have chosen to do his commandments, departing each one from the religion of his fathers, yet I and my sons and my brothers will live by the covenant of our fathers, the Torah. Far be it from us to desert the Torah, the law, and the ordinances, the hukim, the mashpatim, all of that. We will not obey the king's words by turning aside from our religion to the right or to the left. When he had finished speaking these words loudly, a Jew came forward in the sight of all to offer sacrifice. Lord have mercy. He came in front of the sight of all to offer sacrifice upon the altar in Modin according to the king's command. So that this man stepped forward like, I don't know what he's talking about, but I'm about to sacrifice this because I want to be a friend of the king. He did it right in his face. And when Mattathias saw it, he burned with zeal and his heart was stirred. He gave vent to righteous anger. He ran and killed that man upon the altar. At the same time, he killed the king's officer who was forcing them to sacrifice. He tore down the altar. Thus, he burned with zeal for the Torah, for the law, as Pinchas did against Zimri, the son of Salu. Then Mattathias cried out in the city with a loud voice, saying, Let everyone who is zealous for the law, for the Torah, and supports the covenant, come out with me. And he and his sons fled to the hills, and they left all they had in the city. Then many who were seeking righteousness and justice went down to the wilderness to dwell there with them. They, their sons, their wives, their cattle, because evils pressed heavily upon them. And it was reported to the king's officers and to the troops in Jerusalem, the city of David, that men who had rejected the king's command had gone down in hiding places in the wilderness. Many pursued them and overtook them. They encamped opposite them and prepared for battle against them on the Shabbat, on the Sabbath day. And they said to them, Enough of this. Come out and do what the king commands and you will live. But they said, We will not come out, nor will we do what the king commands, and so profane the Sabbath. Meaning we're not going to fight on Shabbat. You're not going to make us. Today you do no work. And the enemy hastened to attack them. But they did not, Mattathias, they did not answer them or hurl a stone at them or block up their hiding places. For they said, Let us all die in our innocence. Heaven and earth testify for us that you are killing us unjustly. So they attacked them on the Shabbat and they died with their wives. Oh, I'm sorry. This is not Mattathias. This is just another group that went running. Not Mattathias. Another group that went running, hiding to protect themselves and continue living as Jews. So this group of people said, we will not do anything on the Sabbath. So let us die in our innocence. Heaven and earth will testify for us that you are killing us unjustly. So they attacked them. So the king's a group attacked them on the Shabbat, and they died with their wives, children, and cattle. To the number of 1,000 people died. And when Maccabees and his friends learned of this, they mourned for them deeply, and each said to his neighbor, if we all do like our brothers just did and refuse to fight with these Gentiles for our lives and our ordinances, they will quickly destroy us from the earth. So they made a decision that day. Let us fight against every man who comes to attack us on the Shabbat day. Let us not all die like our brethren died in their hiding places. So this is called counterattacks. So there united with them a company of Hasidians, mighty warriors of Israel, everyone who offered himself willingly for the law, for the Torah, and all who became fugitives to escape their troubles. So you also had people that they didn't pay that water bill, and their electricity got shut off, and they might got some child support payments they didn't make, and they're fugitives, and they joined this mighty warriors of Israel who are following the Torah. They joined them to escape their troubles, and they joined and reinforced them. So they got extra troops from these people who wasn't doing what they're supposed to do. And they organized an army and struck down sinners in their anger and lawless men in their wrath. And survivors fled to the Gentiles for safety. Now understand, the Hasidians, these mighty warriors of Israel, and anyone who was willingly to uphold the law, along with these people that had some troubles they needed to get away from, that reinforced them. They organized the army, and they went and they found people that were not obeying the Torah, and they struck them down. Sinners are people that violate the Torah, and lawless men mean they have no Torah. So whoever they found, they struck them down in their wrath. And the survivors of these Jews, because that's Jews they're killing now, non-Torah following Jews and Jews that are committing sins, doing things that the Torah says not to do on purpose, those kind of Jews they kill. So this is Jew on Jew fighting right here. The Jews that could make it out, these lawless men Jews, the ones that could make it out, they fled to the Gentiles for safety. And Maccabees and his friends went about and tore down the altars, and they forcibly circumcised all the uncircumcised boys that they found within the borders of Israel. They hunted down the arrogant men, and the work prospered in their hands. They rescued the law out of the hands of the Gentiles and the kings. They rescued the Torah out of the hands of the Gentiles and the king, and they never let the sinner gain the upper hand. These lawless Jews. Okay, and now, so you see that the Maccabees, they started in-house. They cleaned up they got rid of these Jews that was not trying to do the will of Hashem. So they cleaned house that way first. Now, we're going to, and they did circumcisions and got some things back right. Now we're going to read the last words of Maccabees. So now the days drew near for Maccabees to die, and he said to his sons, arrogance and reproach have now become strong. It's a time of ruin and furious anger. Now, my children, show zeal for the Torah, the law, and give your lives for the covenant of our fathers. Remember the deeds of the fathers, which they did in their generations, and receive great honor and everlasting name. Was not Abraham found faithful when tested, and it was reckoned to him as righteousness? Joseph, in the time of his distress, kept the commandment and became Lord of Egypt. Phinehas, our father, because he was deeply zealous, he received the covenant of everlasting priesthood. And Joshua, because he fulfilled the command, became a judge in Israel. Caleb, because he testified in the assembly, received an inheritance in the land. David, because he was merciful, inherited the throne of the kingdom forever. Elijah, or Eliyahu, because of the great zeal for the law, he was taken up into heaven. Hananiah, Azariah, Mishael believed, and they were saved from the flame. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Daniel, because of his innocence, was delivered from the mouth of the lions, and so observed from generation to generation that none who put their trust in him will lack strength. Do not fear the words of a sinner, for his splendor will turn into dung and worms. Today he will be exalted, but tomorrow he will not be found, because he has returned to the dust, and his plans will perish. My children, be courageous and strong, and grow strong in the law and the Torah, and by it you will gain honor. Now behold, I know that Simeon your brother is wise in counsel. Always listen to what he's saying, because remember he has those sons, Maccabees. He's wise. Listen to him. He shall be your father. Judas Maccabeus, he has been a mighty warrior from his youth. He shall command the army for you and fight the battle against the peoples. You shall rally about you all who observe the Torah, the law, and avenge the wrong done to your people. Pay back the Gentiles in full and heed what the law commands. Then he blessed them and was gathered to his fathers. He died in the 146th year, that's 166 BCE, and he was buried in the tomb of his fathers at Moedin. And all Israel mourned for him with great lamentation. So this is subtitled The Early Victories of Judas. Now, let's see what's happening with these children of Mattathias. When Judas' son, who was called Maccabeus, took command in his place, all his brothers and all who had joined his father helped him, and they gladly fought for Israel. He extended the glory of his people like a giant. He put on his breastplate, he girded on his armor of war and waged battles, protecting the host by his sword. He was like a lion in his deeds, like a lion's cub roaring for prey. He searched out and pursued the lawless, the Jews that don't have no Torah. He burned those who troubled his people. Lawless men shrank back in fear of him. Jews that are not doing the Torah shrank back because they're scared of him now. All the evildoers again, those that are not doing the Torah, they were confounded, and deliverance was prospered by his hand. He embittered many kings, but he made Jacob glad by his deeds, Jacob as in Israel, and his memory is blessed forever. He went through the cities of Judah. He destroyed the ungodly out of the land. Thus he turned away wrath from Israel. He was renowned to the ends of the earth. He gathered in those who were perishing. But Apollonius gathered together Gentiles in a large force from Samaria to fight against Israel. And when Judas learned of it, he went out to meet him, and he defeated and killed this Apollonius. Many were wounded and fell, and the rest fled. Then they seized their spoils, and Judas took the sword of Apollonius and used it in battle for the rest of his life. Now when Saram, the commander of the Syrian army, heard that Judas had gathered a large company, including a body of faithful men who stayed with him and went out into battle, he said, Saram said, I will make a name for myself and win honor in the kingdom. I will make war on this Judas and his companions who scorned the king's command. And again, a strong army of ungodly men went up with him, Saram, that wants to make a name for himself, and he went to take vengeance on the sons of Israel. And when he approached the ascent of Beth Horon, Judas went out to meet him with a small company. And when they saw this army coming to meet them, they said to Judas, hey, how can we, few as we are, fight against so great a stronger multitude? And we're faint. Oh my goodness. For we have eaten nothing today. And Judas replied, it's easy for many to be hemmed in by a few. It's easy for many to be hemmed in by a few. For in the sight of heaven, there is no difference between saving by many or saving by few. A salvation is a salvation, right? It's not on the size of the army, but that the victory in battle depends. But the strength comes from heaven, not by might, not by power. They come against us in great pride and lawlessness. They got no Torah to destroy us and our wives and our children and to spoil us. But we fight for our lives and our laws, our Torah. He himself will crush them before us. As for you, don't be afraid of him. And when he finished speaking, he rushed suddenly against Saram and his army. So he got done speaking. He said, ah! And he rushes out against Saram and his army. And they were crushed before him, Judah. They pursued them down the descent of Beth Horon to the plain. 800 of them fell. And then the rest fled into the land of the Philistines. Then Judas and his brothers began to be feared, and terror fell upon the Gentiles round about them. His fame reached to the king, and the Gentiles talked of the battles of Judas Maccabeus. Now, this is called the policy of Antiochus. When King Antiochus heard these reports, he was greatly angered, and he sent and gathered all the forces of his kingdom, a very strong army, and he opened his coffers and gave a year's pay to his forces and ordered them to be ready for any need. Then he saw that the money in the treasury was exhausted and that revenues from the country were small because of the dissension and disaster which he had caused in the land by abolishing the laws that had existed from the earliest days. He feared that he might not have such funds as he had before for his expenses and for the gifts which he used to give more lavishly than the preceding kings. He was greatly perplexed in his mind, like, I'm broke. And he determined to go to Persia and collect some revenue. Let me get some money from these Persians and get some revenues from those regions and raise a large fund because he wants to get Maccabeus. He left Lysias, and a distinguished man of royal lineage, in charge of the king's affairs from the river Euphrates to the borders of Egypt. Lysias was also to take care of Antiochus, his son, until he returned. To get that money, like, let me get this money right quick. Watch my son and watch this land. And he turned it over to Lysias, half of his troops and the elephants, and gave him orders about all that he wanted done. So he took the other half to go with him to get this money forcefully. As for the residents of Judea and Jerusalem, Lysias was to send a force against them to wipe out and destroy the strength of Israel and the remnant of Jerusalem. He was to banish the memory of them from the place, settle aliens, put foreigners on all their territory, and distribute their land. Then the king took the remaining half of his troops and departed from Antioch, his capital, in the 147th year, and he crossed the Euphrates River and went through the upper provinces. This is the year of 165 BCE. And we're now in this is subtitled Preparations for Battle. Lysias chose Ptolemy, the son of Dorimenes, and Nicanor and Gorgias, mighty men amongst the friends of the king. So this is the king's people. And he sent them 40,000 infantry and 7,000 cavalry to go into the land of Judah and destroy it as the king had commanded. So they departed with their entire force, and when they arrived, they encamped near Emmaus in the plain. And when the traders of the region heard what was said of them, they took silver and gold in immense amounts and fetters and went to the camp to get the sons of Israel for slaves. So it must have been some kind of decree going out in the land like, hey, we'll give you some money if you can capture these Jews and make them slaves. Get rid of some of the people so you don't have so many to fight. That's kind of brilliant, actually. So these traders from the region heard that, and then they took silver and gold and a lot of money and fetters to bind people together. They go into the camp and they get sent to try to get some of these Jews to make slaves and sell them elsewhere, and thus deplete the land of Jews. And forces from Syria and the land of Philistine joined with them. So now they also get enemies, Syrian or Damascus, like Tyre, that area, and the Philistines to join them to help them get rid of the land of Jews so they don't have that many to fight. Now Judas and his brothers saw the misfortunes had increased and that the forces were encamped in their territory. They also learned what the king had commanded to do to the people to cause their final destruction. But they said to one another, let us prepare the destruction of our people and fight our people in the sanctuary. And fight for our people in the sanctuary. And the congregation assembled to be ready for battle and to pray and to ask for mercy and compassion. Jerusalem was uninhabited like a wilderness. Not one of her children went in or out. The sanctuary was trampled down. The sons of aliens, the sons of the foreigners, they held the citadel. Remember that fortress that's right abutted up against the Temple Mount? It was a lodging place for Gentiles. Joy was taken from Jacob. The flute and the harp ceased to play. So they assembled and went to Mizpah, opposite of Jerusalem, because Israel formerly had a place of prayer in Mizpah. So they fasted that day, put on sackcloth, and sprinkled ashes on their heads, rent their clothes, and they opened the book of the law, the Torah, to inquire into those matters about which the Gentiles were consulting, the images of their idols. They also brought the garments of the priesthood and the first fruits and the tithes, and they stirred up the Nazarites who had completed their days, and they cried aloud to heaven, saying, and these Nazarites, they are in the highest state of holiness. They just completed this holy vow to Hashem. They brought everything holy they had. They brought priests. They brought fruits and tithes. They brought garments of priesthoods. They brought the Torah. They brought Nazarites that had just completed their vow. Anything holy they could. They got everything in one place, and they cried aloud to heaven, saying, what shall we do with these people? Where shall we take them? The sanctuary is trampled down and profaned, and thy priests mourn in humiliation. And behold, the Gentiles are assembled against us to destroy us. Thou knowest what they plot against us. How will we be able to withstand them if thou dost not help us? Then they sounded the trumpets, the shofar, and they gave a loud shout. Ha! And after this, Judah appointed leaders of the people in charge of thousands and hundreds and fifties and tens. And he said to those who were building houses, or who were betrothed, or who were planting vineyards, or who were faint-hearted, that each should return to his home according to the law, just like King David. Then the army marched out, or actually Moshe has this in the Torah. These people should not fight in battle. And then the army marched out and encamped in the south of Emmaus. And Judah said, gird yourselves and be valiant, ready early in the morning to fight with these Gentiles who have assembled against us to destroy us and our sanctuary. It is better for us to die in battle than to see misfortune of our nation and of our sanctuary. But as His will in heaven may be, so will he, so he will do. And this is amazing because he's gathering the people in this altar, this place that they had of worship in Mizpah, which they built when the Babylonians came and jacked stuff up too. So but anyway, so they go to this place and they bring all their things. The Nazarites would have been in the temple finishing up their vow. The priests would have been in the temple. These clothes, these tithes, that's what you bring to the temple. The first fruits, you bring that. Everything that these golden things to use, all these things would have been in the temple. So they're in their prayer, they're like, Hashem, what do you want us to do here? Like this, what we're doing here should be over there in that temple. Please help us to get stuff back right. Okay. So let's go. Chapter 4, we're going to read to chapter 5. So let me see, look at the time. Now, Gorgias took 5,000 infantry. Gorgias is team king, what's the dude's name? Antiochus. Gorgias took 5,000 infantry and 1,000 picked cavalry, and this division moved out by night to fall upon the camp of the Jews and attack them suddenly. Men from the citadel were his guides, but Judas heard of it. He and his mighty men moved out to attack the king's force in Emmaus, while the division was still absent from the camp. When Gorgias entered the camp of Judas by night, he found no one there, so he looked for them in the hills, because he said, these men are fleeing from us. And at daybreak, Judas appeared in the plain with 3,000 men, and they did not have armor or swords, such as they desired, and they saw the camp of the Gentiles strong and fortified with cavalry round about it. These men were trained in war, but Judas said to the men who were with him, do not fear their numbers or be afraid when they charge. Remember how our fathers were saved at the Red Sea when Pharaoh with his forces pursued them. And now let us cry to heaven to see whether he will favor us and remember his covenant with our fathers and crush this army before us today. Then all the Gentiles will know that there is one who redeems and saves Israel. Everybody know, the Jews, even to this day, they have a superpower, their voice, and crying out to Hashem. That is their superpower. Not one missile in this world will ever be stronger than that when they come together as one and cry out to Hashem. So when the foreigners looked up and saw them coming against them, they went forth from their camps to battle. But the men with Judas blew their trumpets, their shofars, and they engaged in battle. The Gentiles were crushed and fled into the plain. And all those in the rear fell by the sword. They pursued them to Gazara and Gazara, and they went to the plains of Idumea and to Azotus and Jamnia, and 3,000 of them fell. When Judas and his force turned back from pursuing them, and he said to his people, don't be greedy for plunder, for there is a battle before us. Gorgias and his force are near us in the hills, but stand now against our enemies and fight them. Afterward, we can seize the plunder boldly. Just as Judas was finishing his speech, a detachment appeared. Coming out of the hills, they saw that their army had just been put to flight, and they saw the Jews were burning the camp, for the smoke that was seen showed what had happened. And when they perceived this, they were greatly frightened. And when they also saw the army of Judas drawn up into the plain, ready for battle, they fled into the land of the Philistines, running away. Then Judas returned to plunder the camp. They seized so much gold and silver, Judas and them, and the cloth dyed blue and sea purple and great riches. On their return, they sang hymns and praises to heaven, for he is good, for his mercy endures forever. Thus Israel had a great deliverance that day. Now this is called the first campaign of Lysias. So now Lysias just got defeated. So now, here we go. Those are the foreigners who escaped, went to report to Lysias all that had happened. Lysias, maybe I'm saying the name wrong. When he heard it, he was perplexed. Like, wait, what? They did what to y'all? And discouraged, like, oh my gosh, for things had not happened to Israel as he intended, nor had they turned out as the king had commanded him. Oh my goodness. But the next year he mustered 60,000. How long did it take King Antiochus to go shank down Persia for money? Okay, so the next year he mustered 60,000 troops, Lysias, and 60,000 picked infantrymen, 5,000 cavalry to subdue them. These numbers sound really big, way more than the first time. So he beefed up that army. They came into Idumea and encamped at Beth Zur, and Judas met them with 10,000 men. Now, let me just read that number again. He met them with 10,000. Judas Maccabees. Lysias had 60,000. That's just infantry. That don't include the 5,000 cavalry and all. So when he saw that his army was strong, he prayed, saying, "Blessed art thou, O Savior Israel, who didst crush the attack of the mighty warrior by the hand of the servant David, and didst give the camp of Philistines into the hands of Jonathan, the son of Saul, and of the men who carried his armor. So do thou hem in this army by the hand of thy people Israel, and let them be ashamed of their troops and their cavalry. Fill them with cowardice. Melt the boldness of their strength. Let them tremble in their destruction. Strike them down with the sword of those who love thee, and let all know thy name, praise thee with hymns." And let all who know thy name praise thee with hymns. Then both sides attacked. Boom. And there fell of the army of Lysias 5,000 men. They fell in action. When Lysias saw the rout of his troops and observed the boldness which inspired those of Judas and how ready they were to either live or to die nobly, he departed. He left Antioch and enlisted mercenaries, paid hired soldiers to invade Judah again with an even larger army. So he pulled back, got the mercenaries to go through to save his army. Then Judas said, okay, this is called cleansing and dedication of the temple. Then Judas and his brothers, "Behold, our enemies are crushed. Let us go up and cleanse the sanctuary and dedicate it." Because remember, the other guy pulled back. So all the army assembled, and they went up to Mount Zion, the Temple Mount, and they saw the sanctuary there desolate. The altar was profane. The gates were burned in the courts, and they saw bushes sprung up as a thicket. There was bushes growing on the Temple Mount. Bushes. That's how long they were not able to take care of the Temple Mount. They saw bushes sprung up in a thicket, or as one of the mountains. They saw the chambers of the priests in ruins. Then they rent their clothes, mourned with great lamentation, and sprinkled themselves with ashes, fell face down on the ground, sounded the signal on the trumpets, and cried out to heaven. Then Judas detailed men to fight against those in the citadel until he had cleansed the sanctuary. Because you had that fortified, that fortress abutted against the Temple Mount. So he had to get that taken care of too, get rid of any enemies there so they could have the whole Temple Mount to cleanse. He chose blameless priests devoted to the law. Remember, you had people who were no longer devoted to the Torah. So he made sure he chose the priests that were devoted to the law. And they cleansed the sanctuary, and they removed the defiled stones to an unclean place. They deliberated what to do about the altar of burnt offering, the olah offerings, which had been profaned. So they had to think how to do that. And they thought it was best to tear it down, lest bring reproach upon them, for the Gentiles had defiled it. So they tore down the altar and stored up the stones in a convenient place on the temple hill until there should come a prophet to tell what to do with them. Interesting. They took unhewn stones that are not cut with any metal, just like we learned in Joshua. They took unhewn stones as the law directs, and they built a new altar like the former one. They also rebuilt the sanctuary and the interior of the temple and consecrated the courts. They made new holy vessels and brought the lampstand, the menorah, and the altar of incense and the table unto the temple. And then they burned incense on the altar and lighted the lamps on the lampstand, and they gave light to the temple. They placed the bread on the table and hung up the curtains. Thus they finished all the work they had undertaken. Early in the morning on the 25th day of the 9th month, which is the month of Chislev, in one of the 148th year, that's 164 BCE, they rose and offered sacrifice as the law directs on the new altar of burnt offering, which they had built. And at the very season and on that very day, the Gentiles had profaned it. It was dedicated with songs and harps, lutes and cymbals. And the word in Hebrew for dedication is Hanukkah. Okay. All the people fell on their faces. So you would see it in Hebrew. And they Hanukkah with songs and harps and lutes and cymbals. All the people fell on their faces and worshipped and blessed heaven, who had prospered them. So they celebrated the dedication, the Hanukkah, of the altar for 8 days and offered burnt offerings with gladness. They offered a sacrifice of deliverance and praise. They decorated the front of the temple with golden crowns and small shields. They restored the gates and the chambers for the priests and furnished them with doors. There was a great gladness among the people, and the reproach of the Gentiles was removed. Then Judas and his brothers and all the assembly of Israel determined that every year at that season, the days of dedication of the altar should be observed with gladness and joy for 8 days, beginning with the 25th of the month of Chislev. And at that time, they fortified Mount Zion with high walls, and strong towers around about it to keep the Gentiles from coming and trampling them down as they had done before. And he stationed a garrison there to hold it. And he also fortified Beth Zor so that the people might have a stronghold that faced Idumea. Idumea is also Mount Seir, Esau's area. But at that time, Idumea had come more north, so it's not as far. The Edomites had come more north, so that's even a bigger area now at this time. Okay, let's get that last chapter, just make sure. But we got our dedication. Now we know what happened in this holiday. Let's just do this last chapter for completeness. We'll read a little bit of it. We might not need, because we kind of got the point now. But let's get this part. Chapter 5, it starts out, wars with neighboring peoples. When the Gentiles round about heard that the altar had been built and the sanctuary was Hanukkah, as it was before, they became very angry. So when they heard the altar was built and the sanctuary was dedicated, as it was before, they became very angry, the Gentiles around them, and they determined to destroy the descendants of Jacob who lived amongst them. So the Gentiles in the neighboring areas just heard that the Jews got the temple fixed up again. And you might have been living in the hills with your Gentile neighbors. They heard that your family in Jerusalem got that temple going back. They began to kill and destroy among the people. So your neighbor kills you for no reason because they heard that in Jerusalem, even though you live in a whole another place, not Jerusalem, but around Jerusalem, you get killed because they heard that. So they began to kill and destroy amongst the people. But Judas made war on the sons of Esau in Idumea and Akrabanatne, because they kept lying in wait for Israel. So they were actually doing some guerrilla warfare, trying to wait for more Jews. And he dealt them a heavy blow and also humbled them and despoiled them. He also remembered the wickedness of the sons of Bean, who were a trap and a snare to the people, and ambushed them on the highways. Wow. They were shut up by him in their towers, and he encamped against them and vowed their complete destruction and burned with fire their towers and all who were with them. He getting the road bandits. He getting the crazy neighbors. He getting the Edomites that's coming up. Judas Maccabees is getting everybody. And then he crossed over to attack the Ammonites when he found a strong band and many people with Timothy as their leader. He engaged in many battles with them, and they were also crushed before him. He struck them down. He also took Jazer and its villages, and he returned to Judea. Now, this is called the liberation of the Galilean Jews. Now, the Gentiles in Gilead gathered to get together against the Israelites who lived in their territory. Now we're going to the northern part of Israel. And you can see this madness is happening all throughout Israel. So they gathered against the Israelites who lived in their territory, and they planned to destroy them. But the Jews, fled to the stronghold of Dath-Emah and sent to Judas and his brothers a letter which said, the Gentiles around us have gathered together against us to destroy us. I know that dude was running who had to get that message to Judas. Him and that horse, he was probably carrying the horse when the horse got tired. They are also preparing to come and capture the stronghold to which we have fled, and Timothy is leading their forces. Now, well, hold up. Did Timothy turn tail? He's a turncoat? When they found a band and many people with Timothy as their leader. It sounds like Timothy's a Jew, and then he crossed over to the dark side. He think he Darth Vader or something. Okay, let me find my place. Okay, so they are, let me see, Timothy is leading their forces. Now then, come and rescue us from their hands, for many of us has fallen already, and all of our brethren who are in the land of Tob have been killed. The enemy have captured their wives, children, and goods, and have destroyed about 1,000 men there. While the letter was still being read, behold, other messengers with their garments rent came from Galilee and made a similar report, and they said that against them had gathered together men of Ptolemais and Tyre and Sidon and all of Galilee, all the Gentiles. So now they're fighting war on the northern front. That northern front, Syria, Lebanon, that's all that area there. So they're coming to annihilate us. This sounds so familiar. When Judas and the people heard these messages, a great assembly was called to determine what they should do for their brethren who were in distress and being attacked by enemies. Then Judas said to Simon, his brother, choose your men. Because remember, Simon is the one that Dad said he got good sense. So always go to counsel for him. Ask him what you should do. Judas said to Simon, his brother, choose your men and go and rescue your brethren in Galilee. I and Jonathan, my brother, will go to Gilead. But he left Joseph, the son of Zechariah, and Azariah, a leader of the people with the rest of the forces in Judah to guard it. So he gave them this command: take charge of these people, but do not engage in battle with the Gentiles until we return. Then 3,000 men were assigned to Simon to go to Galilee, and 8,000 to Judas for Gilead. So Simon went to Galilee and fought many battles against the Gentiles, and the Gentiles were crushed before him. Simon, the consultant, he pursued them to, that's how strong, even Simon the consultant is getting some. He pursued them to the gate of Ptolemais. As many as 3,000 of the Gentiles fell, and he despoiled them. He took the Jews of Galilee and Arbaata with their wives and children and all they possessed, and led them to Judea with great rejoicing. So he got them out of the area and marched them south to Judah. Simon, the consultant. Judas and Jonathan in Gilead. That's the subtitle. Judas and Maccabees and Jonathan, his brother, crossed the Jordan and went 3 days' journey into the wilderness. They encountered the Nabateans, who met them peacefully. We know the Nabateans. That's the ones that supposedly made Petra. Met them peaceably and told them all that had happened to their brother in Gilead, and many of them have been shut up in Bozrah and Bezor and Al-Emah and Chasphon, Maked and Karnaim. And all these cities were large, strong and large, and some had even been shut up in the other cities of Gilead. The enemy are getting ready to attack the stronghold tomorrow and take and destroy all these men in one day. So they literally go up to where these Nabateans are, and they're peacefully, they're peacefully, and he tells them everything that's happening there. And then Judas and his army quickly turned back by the wilderness road to Bozrah, and he took the city, and he killed every male by the edge of the sword. Then he seized all its spoils and burned it with fire. He departed from them that night, and they went all the way to the stronghold of Dath-Emah. And at dawn they looked up, and behold, a large company that could not be counted, carrying ladders and engines of war, to capture the stronghold and attacking the Jews within. So Judas so he got some news from the Nabateans about there's going to be war from towards Bozrah, and they're gonna destroy all these men, probably your people, in one day. So Judah goes in that direction, and they killed they go to Bozrah. That's why it says quickly turn back by the wilderness road, go to Bozrah. He takes the city, kills every male by the edge of the sword, Judas and them. And they seize the spoils and burn it with fire. He leaves at night. They go all the way to this Dath-Emah. And at dawn they looked up, and they saw a huge army of the Gentiles coming with war engines of war, whatever that is, ladders and whatnot. And they came to capture the stronghold and attack the Jews within. So Judas saw that the battle had begun, and that the cry of the city went up to heaven with trumpets and loud shouts. And he said to the men in the forces, fight today for your brethren. Then he came up behind them, and the foreigners, in 3 companies, who sounded their trumpets and cried aloud in prayer. And when the army of Timothy realized that it was the Maccabees, they fled before them. And Judas and them dealt them a heavy blow, and many as 8,000 of them fell that day. Next, he turned aside to Al-Emah and fought against it and took it, Judas, and he killed every male in it, plundered it, burned it with fire. From there, he marched on and took Chasphon, Maked, Bozrah, and the other cities of Gilead. So all what the Nabateans told him, he got them cities straight, Judas Maccabees. After these things, Timothy gathered another army and encamped opposite of Raphon on the other side of the stream. Judas sent men to spy out the camp, and they reported to him, all the Gentiles around us have gathered to him. It's such a very large force. They've also hired Arabs to help them, and they're encamped across the stream, ready to come and fight against you. And Judas went to meet them. Now Judas and his army drew near to the stream of water. Timothy said to the officers of his forces, if he crosses over to us first, we will not be able to resist him, for he will surely defeat us. But if he shows fear and camps on the other side of the river, we'll cross over to him and defeat him. And when Judas approached the stream of water, he stationed the scribes of the people, the men standing there with a pen, a pencil in their hand. The Levites that make the Torah, that write down the Torah, he stationed the scribes of the people at the stream and gave them this command: permit no man to encamp, but make them all enter the battle. Then crossed over against them first, and the whole army followed him. So those scribes had to make sure nobody sets up camp. We got to keep this moving. So the Gentiles were defeated before him, and they threw away their arms and fled into the sacred precincts at Karnaim. I guess there was some kind of religious things there, and they go running into the little religious center. But Judas, took the city and burned the sacred precincts with fire, together with all who were in them. Their temple or whatever, that all got burnt together with them. Thus Karnaim was conquered, and they could stand before Judas no longer. And this next part is called Return to Jerusalem. Then Judas gathered together all the Israelites in Gilead, small and great, from the mayor of Gilead to the janitor of Gilead, the street sweeper. He gathered everybody in Gilead, small to the great, with their wives and children and good, such a very large company, to go to the land of Judah, to take them south again for safety, so they can all encamp in a certain area. So they came to Ephron. This was a large and very strong city on the road, and they could not go around it to the right or the left, that they had to go through it. But the men of the city shut them out and blocked up the gates with stones. And Judah sent them a friendly message. Let us pass through your land to get to our land. No one will do you harm. We'll simply pass on by foot. But those guys refused to open up to him. Then Judas ordered proclamation to be made to the army that each should encamp where he was. So set up camp for tonight. So the men of the forces encamped, and he fought against the city all that day and all that night. I guess they set up camp and fought. And the city was delivered into his hands. He destroyed every male by the edge of the sword and razed and plundered the city, and he passed through the city over the slain. And they crossed the Jordan into the large plain before Bethshan, and Judas kept rallying the laggards. The jokers that's in the back, slowing down the line. Come on, you laggards, you sluggards. He kept encouraging the people all the way till they came to the land of Judah. You got a 3-legged donkey, and it's just, he's trying to get everybody to move as fast as they can down. And, you got grandma on the 3-legged donkey trying to, you know what I mean? And Uncle Joe got one leg and a peg leg, and you got, blind Betsy over there trying to figure out where the path is. You got all these things going on, and he's trying to get everybody to come south. And so let's see. So they kept rallying the laggards and encouraging the people all the way till he came to the land of Judah. So they went up Mount Zion with gladness and joy, and they offered burnt offerings, because not one of them had fallen before they returned to safety. And this is called Joseph and Azariah defeated. So now, while Judas and Jonathan were in Gilead, and Simon his brother was in Galilee before Ptolemais, Joseph the son of Zechariah and Azariah, the commanders of the forces, so he's still in that Jerusalem area, he heard of their brave deeds. Joseph was the one that Judas Maccabees put in control of Jerusalem. He said, don't fight nobody till we come back. So he heard of their brave deeds and the heroic war that they fought, Judas and Simon. So they had said, let us also make a name for ourselves. Let us go and make war on the Gentiles around us. No, Joseph, you're not supposed to do that. Here we go. Let's read it. And they issued orders to the men of the forces that were with them, and they marched against Jamnia, and Gorgias and his men came out of the city to meet them in battle. And Joseph and Azariah were routed and pursued to the borders of Judea. As many as 2,000 people of Israel fell that day. Thus the people suffered a great rout, because thinking to do a brave deed, they did not listen to Judas and his brothers, but they did not belong to the family of those men through whom deliverance was given to Israel. The man Judas and his brothers were greatly honored in all of Israel and amongst the Gentiles. Wherever their name was heard, men gathered to them and praised them. And this is the last part, and it's called Success at Hebron in Philistia. Then Judas and his brothers went forth and struck the sons of Esau in the land to the south. He struck Hebron and its villages and tore down its strongholds and burned its towers round about. Then he marched off to go to the land of the Philistines and passed through Mount Isaiah. And on that day, some priest who wished to do a brave deed, man, when it always starts out like that, that's not going to happen. You ain't going to get that brave deed. On that day, some priests who wished to do a brave deed fell in battle, for they went out to battle unwisely. But Judas turned aside to Azotus in the land of the Philistines, and he tore down their altars and the graven images of their gods, and he burned with fire. He plundered the cities and returned to the land of Judah. I wanted to get that done in under an hour. I don't know. Try to see the time. Yo. Wow. Let me just drink some coffee. Yo. That's a good story. It's not a good story, because the Jewish people keep going through these things, but these holidays remind them, cry out to the Hashem, come together as one, cry out to Hashem when these nations come upon you. Keep doing what you're doing. Cry out to Hashem. He is the mighty one of Israel. And they are to do these holidays so that they don't get in the trap thinking that they're mighty. Like some of these priests, And these people who, and it says they always start out and they want to do a brave deed, and they go out there and they get jacked up because they're doing things out of order. And so that's the remedy even to this day. I hope that you really got a good understanding of what this holiday of Hanukkah is about. Please, I'll put the information down below for where to find the rest of this. I just read a piece so we can get the flavor of what this Hanukkah is all about and why it's such a big deal. And it's called the Festival of Lights, but you never really know. You just hear about Judas the Hammer. I think Maccabees means hammer or something. Judas the Hammer. But it's not the point. The point is that when the people need to cry out to Hashem, they need to cry out to Hashem. And there should be no delay. And they got to be, followers of the Torah, not some whatever. So that's what I learned out of it. Put down below. Tell me what you got out of that. What did you learn new? Or if you got something else to add to it, please add to it. But remember, the story is not done. We just read a little bit to get the flavor. So I hope you enjoyed that, and we'll see you next time. Oh, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to look at the halakha of, so what is it that the Jews have to do to honor the halakha from Rabbi Aden Israel Steinsaltz? What does Israel have to do to perform the commandments that are required for this law? What do they do together for this law, for this holiday? So there's certain things that they have to do as a nation to honor and remember this holiday. And that's what we're going to read about next time. So see you then.